G'day, and welcome to the last episode of this series of Adrian's Reptile World. It's been great to have your company for the last 12 weeks. During that time, we've met some fascinating reptiles from all over Australia and road tested many that can make great pets. While Australians are only just beginning to realise what a great resource we have, Americans and Europeans long ago discovered our secret. That's why some of the most commonly kept pet reptiles overseas are in fact Australian. America has only 1/3 the number of native reptiles that Australia has, yet in some states, 1 out of every 20 homes contains a pet reptile. Currently in Australia, reptile ownership is somewhere in the order of 1 in every 400 homes. That's where America was 20 years ago, but we are catching up fast. Reptiles offer many advantages over the more conventional pet budgie, rabbit, or even dog or cat. They have no feathers or fur, so they won't give you allergies. They don't suffer from separation anxiety if you decide to go away for the weekend. They don't need to be walked, they won't make any noise, and most will be happy to be fed 3 times a week, or in the case of snakes, as little as once a week. They are in fact a low-maintenance pet that is ideally suited to a busy lifestyle. Most pet reptiles also don't require a large amount of space. They will thrive in enclosures that are big enough to give them a sense of territory, and most 3 to 4 foot cages will provide this. This makes them a perfect pet for people living in units or townhouses and can't provide the necessary space required for a cat or dog, or have restrictions on squawking birds. Many people believe the misconception that reptiles are difficult to care for. This is not true. They simply require a basic understanding that they are different from warm-blooded pets. A multi-billion-dollar industry has developed around dispensing the necessary know-how and products to make this an easy transition. There's now a plethora of information in books and on the internet about virtually every species of reptile you may wish to keep. It's also taking pressure off innumerable wild reptiles because people have mastered the art of breeding them in captivity. Why would anyone bother taking reptiles from the wild with all their associated problems when they can acquire a captive-bred, problem-free animal from a breeder? One of the most frequently asked questions is, where can I get a pet reptile? Well, at this stage, only some states in Australia allow the sale of reptiles in pet shops, so the rest of us will have to wait a little bit longer for that. However, there are still many places where you can find reptiles for sale. Reptile clubs, internet forums, and classified websites are all great places to start. In other parts of the world, reptile expos have become very popular. In America, there are hundreds of large expos held every year, generating employment and millions of dollars. Australian reptile expos are still a new concept, but have potential for a lot of growth. The largest of all is the Sydney Frog and Reptile Show, held at Castle Hill each year, where the turnout exceeds 10,000 people over a weekend. Expos are an excellent place to see what's available, get expert advice, and then decide on and even buy the reptile that best suits you. It might surprise you to know that in New South Wales, for example, more than 320 species of reptile and amphibian are permitted to be kept, so we are not short on choice. There are also hundreds of products on sale, all designed to make your reptile keeping experience easier and more rewarding. I visited the 2009 show and spoke to some of the leading people in the industry. We have the organiser of the show here, Anthony Stimson, and we might just ask him a few words about this event and how happy he is with its success today.
Oh, extremely happy. Yeah, it's been great. Thousands of smiles and interested people, which is what we wanted to see.
Okay. And what sort of a turnout have you had over the 2 days?
Oh, it's been in the many thousands of people. It's very exciting, yeah. Packed with people and everyone was really happy. It's great.
Can you tell us a little bit about the history of this event?
Well, my original idea was to try and catch people and teach people and get people to learn more about nature generally back in 2003, actually 2002. We worked out many years ago back then that the way to reach people was in fast, flashy shows that they usually call expos, and seeing the American model, of course, seeing it working, thought it's time to try it out. The real interest wasn't in all the furry and koala, furry animals like koalas and wombats and things we had there. It was in the scaly animals and the frogs as well, So So we knew that the American model again was the winner, and that was the reptile expos, of course. So we kicked it off in 2007 as the Australian Frog and Reptile Expo.
I think the expo is a continuation of the growth that's been happening in the hobby in the last 10 years, and I'm very encouraged by how it went. A lot of people were buying animals, but a lot of people were the young family market that are just thinking about getting into the hobby. And I saw a lot of converts to the hobby. It's such a logical thing for people to turn to, and so I was very, very happy with it, happy with the response. And I'm looking forward to the continued growth, because if compared to last year's expo and the year before that, we really are on a steep growth curve.
The first show was no word of mouth. It was all up to us to try and tell the industry about it, and it was such hard work. So the very few that came to the first expo passed the message on to the rest of the industry.
We have some weird cultural phenomena in our past in Australia that have retarded the hobby's growth. But you know, those things are dissolving now. And the whole business of, first of all, it was any good snake is a dead snake, or however that goes. Then it was any good snake is a protected snake, and people shouldn't keep them in captivity. It's come all the way around now. So we're very quickly in Australia starting to look at the alternative of native animals for pets. I suspect we'll never get quite where the Americans are with regards to 1 in 30 or 1 in 40 households holding a reptile. But at 1 in 400 households in New South Wales now, we got a long way to go, and it's encouraging. I think 5 to 10 years from now, we're going to be giving the Americans a bit of a run.
The whole concept also with the expo is to promote good care of reptiles and frogs. Good care, and the best way to show good care is to show perfect and beautiful specimens, and the proud owners of them, and by giving them the opportunity to show their animals off and show how well kept they are is a really great way to promote really good care of the animals, and also to show the enthusiasm and hopefully pass that enthusiasm on to other people as well.
I don't remember a time when I haven't been interested in reptiles and amphibians. All my life since I was a very young child, I've just had an absolute fascination with reptiles and frogs. This has led on to obviously a career in reptiles. I'm currently the senior reptile keeper at Melbourne Zoo, and all along the way, like many herpetologists, I've had a great interest in literature, anything associated with herpetology and the keeping of reptiles. So I have a large library of books myself, like many people, and this developed into a business over the years, and I tend to visit as many of the reptile expos as I can around Australia, or anywhere reptile books are bought and sold.
Reptiles Australia was a brainwave I had probably about 5.5 years ago, and what we looked to do was provide something to the Australian community that didn't exist, and it was an opportunity to bring reptile keeping right into the forefront of the public. And so we produced our first issue 5.5 years ago, and we've produced 30 more since then.
Growing up in Australia, there was not a lot of literature available for people interested in herpetology. Whatever literature we did have generally came from the United States, who were slightly ahead of us with their approach to herpetoculture. And this led on to an obvious need for books, perhaps written by Australians, about Australia's herpetology, the reptiles and amphibians, and the keeping of these animals. And I had many inquiries through my book business for people wanting particular articles on the breeding of pythons that have appeared in a variety of magazines like Herpetofauna and Monitor magazine or Reptiles Australia. And so I got to thinking that perhaps I should take all these different articles and put them into the one place and make it easily accessible for people. And that's how the Keeping and Breeding of Australians Python book came into being. And there are around 5 different authors that are recognised for their expertise in particular species of pythons, and that's why these people were chosen. Due to the success of the Python book, it just seemed logical to follow on with perhaps the next best area of keeping Australian reptiles, which was lizards. And lizards seem to be becoming more and more popular in the hobbyist trade. So we ended up going on to produce the keeping and breeding Australian lizards as well, which has actually ended up being twice as thick as the Python book. And the author said to me, "How much do you want us to write about our particular subjects?" I said, "Well, just write until you feel as though you've written enough." And from a publishing point of view, I wondered, how thick is this book going to be? And as it turned out, it is about twice as thick as the Python book, but it does address pretty much most of the species of Australian lizards, and it even discusses a lot of the lizards that haven't yet been kept. So they're both proven to be very useful items to have if you're interested in the subject of keeping and breeding Australian reptiles.
One of the greatest things we get to do every year is come to this expo in Castle Hill, and it's really exciting. There's thousands of people come through, and a lot of the people that come through here are new to the hobby, and some of them are people that have been subscribers to our magazine for many years. And we also get a number of our photographers as well. And so one of the great things about this expo is we actually get to meet face to face with the writers as well as the public and the subscribers, and we get that really great feedback of what they do like about it, what they don't like about it. And when you meet new and interesting subscribers, soon you find out that they have new and interesting species that we haven't covered yet. And so all of a sudden a subscriber or a reader turns into a writer, and we form a really great friendship.
We have a range of judges from some of Australia's most eminent reptile keepers and biologists as well, and they look at the condition of the animal, number one, and then other factors come into it, like the colours and just the aesthetics of the animal, of course. And if they're and the judges, some of them are very, very experienced herpetologists or herpetoculturists, so they know how to spot an animal that is well looked after, and they get a ranking based on a variety of criteria from overall health right through to the colours and patterns and so on.
Undoubtedly, python keeping is easily the most popular subject in which we publish. We also publish stories and articles on skinks as well as monitors and dragons, but pythons is really where the Australian public love to be. And I think it's really interesting to see how pythons have changed over the last 5.5 years, and in the way that people are always after the next big thing, with particularly colour morphs and patterning and reduced patterning, and I think that what we're particularly proud of is being able to produce a professional product that allows people to see in bright colour what these different colour morphs and patterns look like that they might not have available commonly in people's collections. And we also have the opportunity to give a lot of great detail written by very professional keepers about the ways in which you can breed and keep these animals.
The thing that we have in common here at this reptile show, that we all belong to the one tribe. I've always had this passion of wanting to be a veterinarian and wanting to do more and more with reptiles, and it's met. I've always mucked around with reptiles since I've been a qualified veterinarian, but with the increase in the hobby, even just in the last 5 to 10 years, it's just skyrocketed. I have another job as well, so I'm a clinical veterinarian at Taronga Zoo, so I get to play around with some fantastic reptiles there on a regular basis. So I'm in reptile heaven.
It was very hard at the first show to convince for example, the pet shops and shops that are trying to specialise in reptile keeping, etc., that this show might be a good place for them to expose themselves to that market. A few shops did come to the first one, a few more to the next one, and after this show, based on the feedback that I've got from every single commercial exhibitor here, I think they'll be coming back along with many more. And the commercial guys that run the pet shops and run the retail side of the industry and wholesale side of the industry are very excited about participating in the next one, which is exciting for me too.
We started Aussie Pythons and Snakes back in 2001, and we've grown that into a website that spans Australia and the world. We have over 15,000 members now, and our initial goal was to educate people on snakes and pythons, and over time that's grown, and now we're looking at covering the reptile hobbyists across Australia and even out into the rest of the world.
Pet shops have some role to play in reptile keeping. For a lot of the general public, they're not aware that reptiles can be kept as pets. So pet shops are there, in my opinion, very much as a starting point or as somewhere where people can recognise that reptiles are able to be kept. From there, now in our state here, we only have half a dozen or so species that can be sold through pet shops. People start with those species, they learn the ins and outs, and then they approach breeders to expand their collection or try something new.
I think of our site as more of a complementary aspect to traditional reptile societies. A lot of older and more experienced herpers do attend reptile society meetings, but we found that a lot of the people new to the hobby, maybe because of their age, maybe because of their experience, find it inconvenient or difficult to get to traditional reptile meets. So our site creates a forum for them to be able to speak to the more experienced herpers and get the true and the relevant information on keeping reptiles and to foster their interest in the hobby.
I believe in this industry, customer service is a huge thing. If you don't have customer service, then you're not going to sell a product. Our customers, we feel we give them as much advice and a great service, and we do our best to give them the information that they need so that then they will therefore be happy with their purchase, leave and then tell somebody else, and that's how we're going to get our clientele through word of mouth, and there's no better advertising than word of mouth. And I believe our clientele is just growing and growing, so we're really happy with that. And I think, your service has to be 100%. It doesn't matter how good or how bad the product is. If there's no service, there's no product.
Future of hobby in Australia, it's certainly increasing. From a lizard point of view, I think one of our major problems is that although we have a large range of species to choose from, none of them are incredibly large in numbers. So not like the millions of bearded dragons that are bred each year in the US. I don't think Australia is 10 years from that at this stage. Most people keeping lizards in Australia tend to keep a small collection, half a dozen different varieties, and I suppose there tends to be one or two common species and then a couple of rarer things in most collections. So it's not a situation at this stage where there's 150 different colour varieties of any particular thing to breed from. Morph breeding in lizards, although there's some interest there, the number of choices that we've got are just not there at this stage. Knobtail geckos are probably the exception there, but even then they're not bred in quite the numbers that they are overseas to be able to establish some of these mutations. And I suppose a lot of the legislation doesn't allow for it. In Queensland here, it's actually technically illegal to knowingly breed a mutation of a reptile. It doesn't stop anybody doing it, but it is to some degree a little bit of a problem. Things like albino blue tongues are becoming a little more prevalent, but it really just depends on what happens with that legislation as to whether or not they make that a more suitable thing to do or whether it still remains technically illegal. So I don't see in the very short term that we're going to have 1 million bearded dragons bred a year. I think we're still 10 years behind the United States in terms of the physical numbers of reptiles being kept by people. But as people's houses get smaller and their times become less, they're going to move into reptiles and away from dogs and cats to some degree, because their space and time demands that. So it's getting there. I think 10 years' time it'll be interesting to see just where we stand in terms of the number of reptiles being kept. At this stage it's still a little less than the people keeping birds, but I think it will overtake certainly bird keeping within a fairly short period of time.
And now it's time for the countdown of the top 10 Australian reptile pets as road tested on this show. Coming in at number 10 are the green tree frogs. How could anyone not like a small, harmless green creature with a permanent smile on its face? Drawbacks to keeping green tree frogs are their requirements for live insect food, their need for a constant supply of clean fresh water, and when they are really happy, they tend to burst into song. Other than that, they can become very tame and make rewarding pets. It would be hard to find a child who didn't think a baby turtle was cute. However, they do grow out of the cute stage within a few years and can live a very long time. Coming in at number 9 is the eastern longneck turtle. It is one of the hardiest turtles available to us and can withstand extreme cold. Set up like an indoor fish tank, a turtle display is hard to beat. You can get the best of both worlds and keep turtles and fish together. But beware, all but the largest fish will eventually disappear. Drawbacks to keeping turtles are that their water needs to be kept very clean, and they do need exposure to ultraviolet light on a regular basis. The banded knobtail gecko comes in at number 8. This is a relative newcomer to the market, and as such is still very expensive. Other than a big price tag and the need for live food, this gecko offers many advantages that are common to the knobtail family. They don't require a large enclosure, and they breed readily in captivity. This species is the most colourful in the group, and as such will always be popular. Along with frogs, knobtail geckos, or nobbies, are very popular with female keepers. I guess they are irresistibly cute. The green tree python comes in at number 7. Like the banded knobtail, the green tree python still has a big price tag, and as such is not accessible to the average beginner. However, it is incredibly beautiful and a great species to work towards keeping. There are numerous different colour morphs within this single species, although what you eventually get is more a case of luck than planning. Contrary to popular belief, the green tree python is one of the easiest pythons to maintain. However, breeding these beauties does require some effort and a bit of luck. Hatching your first clutch of bright yellow or red babies is a sight you will never forget. With a very affordable price tag, the ridge-tailed monitor comes in at number 6. If there's such a thing as a bulletproof monitor, then this is it. Can be trained to eat almost anything protein-based, although a high proportion of insects in the diet is recommended. Ridge-tailed monitors, or ackies as they are affectionately known, are a convenient size. They don't mind being handled and can be happily housed in a small to medium enclosure. Extremely cute as hatchlings, but they will grow fast. There are also some nice colour morphs currently being developed. At number 5 is the central netted dragon. This is arguably the easiest small dragon species to maintain and is extremely forgiving of its keeper. Small in size but big on personality, this attractive lizard can be kept in small groups of 1 male and 2 to 3 females. As for any arid land species, this lizard enjoys a really hot basking spot. But it also should have a cooler place to hide, a great beginner species. Coming in at number 4 is the maculosus python. Probably the easiest of all the children's python species to breed, has been bred for multiple generations in captivity and now available in a wide variety of patterns and colour morphs. A very convenient size and a great beginner python. Number 3 is the blotched blue tongue, a very hardy species that can tolerate low temperatures. A great feeder that tames well. One of the most attractive of all the blue tongues. Also breeds readily. A highly recommended reptile for the beginner. Coming in at number 2 is the jungle carpet python. Of all the Morelia or carpet python subspecies, this is the smallest and easiest to keep. It is also the most colourful and most variable in pattern. Also a good beginner species, but because of its larger size, a good snake to move onto after you've kept a maculosus or something similar. Although wild specimens may be snappy, the jungle carpet has been bred in captivity for so many generations that most of the snappiness has disappeared. Certainly has the most potential for awesome mutations and colours to be developed in the future. And the number 1 all-time best reptile pet is the central bearded dragon. Overseas, the central beardy is already the most commonly kept pet lizard, and with good reason. They have a great personality, they are naturally tame and inquisitive, they are a convenient size, and if you follow a few simple rules, they are easy to care for. They are also inexpensive and being bred in many different colour morphs. If a reptile can have a personality and really interact with its owner, this one is right up there at the top of the list. Well, that marks the end of this series of Adrian's Reptile World.